All right. The surface, I'm going to put my light source over here. So I just make my straight lines going out this way, and they're darker towards my edge. So if I put my light source up here, okay. At the ground source, it's always darker away from my area. The issue with ink is you go from really dark to really light really fast. So you have a value scale that goes around it. Alright, so you have to imagine that this base here has a circle that goes on around it on the other side. So if you have a shadow, it goes from that edge to this edge. And then typically I like to put horizontal lines on my shadows to indicate that it's a flat space. Alright, this is my light source up here. So this is the one that's furthest away, so I'm going to make it pretty dark. Okay, the light source is up here, so my shadow comes out, so I can come from this corner here. Imagine that corner back here. So it comes out from there. It hits this corner here. So it's going to kind of come to a point, and then I just fill it in with horizontal lines. When you're working with ink, you kind of have to leave a space to create the line between them, especially when you have dark meeting dark. So sometimes artistically, between two dark areas, you actually have to leave a very small white line to indicate that that's a different space. But that's an artistic preference. My light source is up here. So I take it across. My light source is up here. I want to make sure I keep this corner intact, so I'm just going to go right next to it. But if you lose that corner, you can go back in and make that corner darker, because you don't want to lose the shape of the object. Alright, this is where it gets tricky. I have my light source here. You have to imagine that this goes around the shape. So it hits this edge, it goes out this way, goes out this way. And then you fill in your circle. And then I want to make it the darkest because it's a shadow. Alright, so this is going to be my darkest area, so I'm going to put them very tight right here. But remember that I have to go around in a circle. So what I do is I go around in a curve this way. And so this is not, my lines that I draw are not a curve, but this shape here curves around. And that's how you get that in where it looks like you're actually going around the shape. So I'm not curving my lines, but I'm leaving a curve around the sphere. And every line that I do is I'm going from the edge, so my edges will be darker, but then I'm adding, and I'm going and adding these different steps of value in reverse. And I'm going further up every time. So, but every time I draw a line, I'm going to the edge. So that way my edge is nice and dark, and I get that value change as I go to the center. This is probably the most difficult one to do, trying to make things look round. All right, so this is an organic shape. So each of these will have variations of dark to light. So you curve around with straight lines and you bring them in. Curve around with straight lines. So if you have anything that's organic, like a hand or a leaf or a stick, you go in and you shade them. And again, you go to your edge where it's darker or where things meet up, and you just kind of, we're just drawing from our imagination right now, thinking like, okay, this is three-dimensional, trying to make it look like a cloud. I go to the edge, I'm using my straight lines. I'm using a diagonal, but they're all trying to be consistent because you don't want to crisscross hatch, because cross hatching is the next one. And you kind of get to tell people what the middle looks like. Because as an artist, you get to tell people what to see. So just imagine each of those bumps as something three-dimensional. You can have areas that are darker still. So this part of my cloud is darker than this part. Cross hatching is a little bit easier to do because you can take lines both directions. Still going to leave the first one white. So then the second one, you have your lines that are kind of staggering and they're kind of light, and then you have a few that are going the other direction. Okay. And each time you add a few more lines. Take it closer together. And then you add a few more directions. So you start with your first two directions, and then you add a diagonal. Have your first two directions, and then add an X. So instead of one diagonal, you add two. And in your last one, you're really close together. And when you're doing this, you're not going like this. You're not going in a zigzag. You bring it up and you go in one direction. So I bring it up and bring it over and go one direction. Because you have less control on the zag than you did of the zig. Alright, scumbling is a series of irregular marks to create value. So if I was doing here, if I change my light source to say down below or to the side, I'm going to put my light source over here for this one. And you can do this wherever you want, but you just kind of have to visualize. So my areas that are going to be darker here, but I still am going to create a visual where I'm going around it, because that's the only way I can show people that it's three-dimensional. But you start with a series of just... Wait. Oh, I haven't run the cross-hatching. I'm sorry, I'm skipping one. Alright, so I'm going to do this, the cross-hatching. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do the light. My bad. And so I take it a value across like this, and I just do the hatch. And then my cross-hatch I'm going to do around my curve. My bad, I was skipping one. Since my light source is down here, my top is probably going to be very dark. So I just cross it with flat lines. So you go around the cylinder. Okay, so this is my light over here. So this is my lighter side. So I'm going to go here. I know this is dark. And I fade as I get to that side. So I have less crossing over here. And that's the beauty of it. You get to choose kind of how much you cross. Again, you don't want to lose corners when you get to the edges. Anytime something is touching an object, like on the bottom, you know that it's going to be darker because it's trapping light. The top is pretty dark too, but I want to make sure I don't lose this corner, so I'm going to make a very fine line there and leave that little edge. So that it's indicating that it is definitely a shadow. And you can see that you get a value scale as you go across. So I'm going from dark to medium to light on that same side. This side here is in the light, so it's going to be overall lighter, but down below it's still darker because that's where the surface touches. And then I have just a few lines indicating that there's some value there. If you lose your corners and you lose the shape of the object, you know that you have to kind of plan better for the next time. Because ink is one of those things, either it's done right, or you have to figure out how to manipulate it and change it, or you have to start over. If I imagine that my sphere has a round side here, it goes over and it flattens it out here. Directly under the sphere will be darker, so through here, and then as it gets away. So I start here with my darkest, and I try to always do my surfaces horizontally so that I'm telling the viewer that it's on a flat surface. Now, if it was rolling downhill, I obviously wouldn't. I would use those diagonals. Typically, shadows are one shade except for when they crisscross or they're under an object. And this is under the object right here, and then it unifies. This is going to be my darkest side because it's the furthest from my light source. And so this again is your issue, that you're using straight lines to create a curve. So you're creating a curve like you did here. So watch. So watch. So watch. So watch. So I start here and I create my curve. So that's my generalized curve, and then I know that that's where I'm going to go with it, and I know that this is still my darkest area, and I maintain that curve as I go around. And then I can add more directional lines. But the integrity of making this a sphere is maintaining that curve around the shape. Okay, there you go. All right. So this is furthest from the light source over here, so I'm going to make it darker. So I'm going to go around each section like I did with that sphere. So I'm going to create the darker areas. And then I add my cross lines. And I create just areas of light to dark. And I get to use my imagination in this shape, because there's no wrong way to make a cloud. In this area I'm going to make very dark because it's being blocked out by another part of the cloud. And remember, don't drag your pen back and forth. You take it one direction real quick. You have more control that way. But you want little miniature value scales in here, so it creates the illusion that it's three-dimensional. So you're giving your cloud poof. And then as I get closer to that light source, I use less and less. Because if it's very light, you're not going to have lots of value. You're just going to have different value. Alright, scumbling is a use of irregular shapes and lines to create value. It's my favorite. We're going to assume that this is white. We're going to assume that this is black. And you use a series of lines, irregular lines. They're typically curves or dots. They're kind of scribbly. And the more you use, and it's kind of like a curved crosshatch. The more you overlap, the more layers you have, the darker it appears. Everybody kind of comes up with their own kind of scumble. This I use for quick sketch a bunch. It's really good for organic shapes and curves because it has a curve in it, so it makes life a little easier. And when you're trying to do a value scale, you can always make things darker. So if you've made something too dark, you just have to punch up that darkness for more contrast. But you want to see the variation of light to dark within your scumble. I'm going to go up the vertical for the stippling. I'm going to assume for this case that my light source is over here. Again, you don't have to do it there, but I'm just going to show you where the shadows are. Opposite my light source is here, so I know that this is my darkest. And I add my scumbling. I go around that curve, and I'm actually just adding less lines as I go around. And then I can add some straight lines up my vertical for reinforcing that it's straight. And then I go around my curve. Same with the top, since it is a flat object. I'm just going around it, and then I add some straight lines across the top so that makes sure that you know it's flat. My sides, if I imagine that this is a round bottom, my sides will go this way. And it's going to hit a curve on the top, so the top is curved. So see how that has a curved angle at the top? So that curve will mimic down here. And then I go real tight at the bottom unless I've lost my line, and then I leave a little bit of a white line. Just depends on what I need. And you can use straight lines in your scumble, and that just indicates that straight side to it. I obviously made my top too dark, but I was showing you how to make it flat. I wasn't paying attention to all the details, just one. So I have my white here. This is going to be my opposite side. So I'm just going to fill that sucker in. Okay, so that's the opposite side of my light source, so it's dark. Now we're going to assume that this light source is kind of parallel to it, so this is another way to bring a side down to a cube. So if I just continue those lines at the bottom of the cube over, and then the top is at a diagonal, you see the top at a diagonal, that's where the light's going to hit it. So I go over here, I add that diagonal, and then I have the shape of my shadow. So when you're trying to do shadows, you have to kind of imagine the light hitting your object and what it would look like. I'll get it. We got it. Alright, so this is darker because it's further from the light. This top is a little bit darker because it's further from the light, but it gets lighter as it goes across. So it's darker at the bottom. I want to make sure I get that edge in. So I just left a little highlight there. And then I just fade it as I go on this side. And then my top is just a little bit lighter, so I'm not going to go as dark at all. And then it just fades to white. Now the scumbling is for the organic shapes, like I said. This is in the spheres. My shape is here. Imagine my circle goes around, so then it adds a shadow underneath that goes around. And it's nice to fill in round shapes. It's so nice. When I'm shading this around the shape, I curve it around just like I did before, but it's so much easier because I'm using a curved line. And I just keep going back and forth, and it narrows as it gets to the lighter part. And then I just keep making less and less marks as I go around. And then I'm just swinging across it around the sphere. And then this is made for clouds. So I pretend like I'm doing every little circle. This is the opposite of my light source. I'm going to make this side a little bit bigger, a little bit darker. But I just imagine drawing each of those shapes that are in that cloud. And then as I get to the lighter part, I just add less and less lines. Because we're trying to use value to create the illusion of volume in 3 dimensions. Alright, stippling is a series of dots to create the illusion of 3D. So look here. We're going to cut this in half because stippling takes forever. So go ahead and draw a line through your half of this. We're going to assume that this is white. And then this is black. And it's just a series of dots. And pressing hard with your pen doesn't do anything. It's just filling in your spaces with dots. Nope, it's too hard. And the closer they get together, they don't grow in size. They just get closer together. It is painful as it seems. So if you can hear it like that, you're adding too much pressure. You're just going to damage the pen. You're not making any more any more lines, any more dots, any brighter or any darker. Your ink is one tone. So no matter how hard you press, it's not going to do any more. You're just going to break the tool. And you can see that I'm not even filling in this space. As long as you have a solid example of value change, I'm fine with it, because it takes forever. So, how many are y'all happy that we're not doing a sibling big assignment? We'd be finished by next Christmas. I said the next, not this Christmas, the next Christmas. It gets, I mean, you can have really delicate, very, very detailed drawings that are stippling, because it's very precise. You will have a miniature assignment, but it's not going to be as torturous. Alright. So I'm trying to get this darker than the other one. Come on.